Hey guys, what's up? It's Ripe again. In today's video, my neighbors are entitled busybodies. They ended up moving the property lines and building an electric fence around my property to show that they own my land. I almost got electrocuted because of their fence. Here is how I dealt with these entitled people. Let's dive right into the story. So I am a middle-aged man living in a small neighborhood in Massachusetts. It is not an affluent area, but I enjoy being surrounded by trees and being only 5 minutes away from everything I might need. I work as a financial consultant, a job that might not sound exciting, but I get a good amount of joy out of it. My wife and I raised 2 kids who are now adults with their own jobs, homes and lives. We have seen people move in and out of the area over the years, and we have liked some of them more than others, but it's a nice place to live in general. An older man lived right next door to us and we absolutely adored him. He was polite and kind, so much so that we did not feel the need to put up a fence between our properties. I always made sure to pick up things from town for him or help him out with his lawn care on weekends, and he would repay me with a beer and a pleasant conversation. Unfortunately, he passed away a couple of months ago. It was peaceful and quick, so we know he did not suffer. He left his property to his grandson Mike, who moved in with his wife Helen after less than a week, which I thought was a little suspicious. It seemed like they had been waiting for him to die so they could move in. They talked about building a fence one day when I was getting in my car to go to work. I offered to build it myself since I'm a good handyman and enjoy making things, but they said something about not trusting me to follow the actual property lines. I shrugged it off, but it did feel like a weird slight against me. I expected the fence to be up within the next few weeks, but no progress was made. Again, I shrugged it off because I did not care if there was a fence between our properties or not. Mike and Helen were not terrible neighbors, but they could be quite annoying. They always seemed to do yard work late at night when my wife and I were already asleep, and it threw our sleep schedules off. We tried to bring it up with them, but they insisted it was not them making noise, but this was clearly a lie because it only started up after they moved in, so it couldn't be anyone else. They also had a tendency to stare at us anytime we were out in our own backyard, no matter what we were doing, and they liked to complain. On more than one occasion, my wife and I would be lounging in the back together with our arms around each other as we watched the birds pick seeds out of the feeder, only to be interrupted by our neighbors. They would loudly speak to each other about how little people value privacy or how disgusting it is to be intimate with someone in public. The worst thing we were doing was holding hands or snuggling, so they had no reason to complain like that, but it did make me hope that they would be putting up a fence just so we didn't have to deal with them anymore. We decided to travel for the holidays and ended up being gone for nearly a month, which I was able to do after saving up my vacation days for a while. We visited family for a bit before going into a bed and breakfast on Cape Cod where we ate good food, explored the nearby shops and spent quality time together. It was fun, but we were excited to get back home. We were greeted by a fence separating our property from Mike and Helen's, but instead of a classic white picket fence that offers privacy, it was a series of posts with wires running between them. It looked a bit like what you might find going around a farm. My wife and I exchanged a look of confusion, but if that's the kind of fence they wanted, I was not going to argue. What I did start to notice was that the property lines seemed off for some reason. Granted, we haven't had anything in place that showed the correct limits of our property, but I could tell from looking that it seemed wrong. I initially approached Mike about it when I saw him outside one day and casually asked if he had double-checked the property lines before putting up the fence, and he just scoffed at me and rudely exclaimed that yes, he had checked. I tried to backpedal a bit as I didn't want to upset him, but I wasn't sure I believed him. I basically let it go because it didn't feel worth it to pursue a pointless fight over a small sliver of property that doesn't really make a difference. Things basically went back to the way they were, including all of the annoying habits our neighbors had, and I was busy enough with work to forget any and all issues going on. I was out in the yard one weekend kicking around a soccer ball just to get some exercise in and to have something to do. I'm not particularly athletic, but I know it's good for me to get some fresh air and move around, even if it is somewhat limited. So I ended up kicking a ball too far and it landed right next to the fence. I jogged over and bent down to pick it up, bracing my hand on the wire when I felt a sudden pain course through my body. I cried out and jumped back as I landed in the grass, and my wife was soon by my side to make sure I was okay. We couldn't believe it. The neighbors had installed an electric fence but did not bother sharing that info with us or putting up any warnings. I was furious and wanted to confront them, but my wife advised against it, telling me that it might be better to contact a professional and take it from there, and I agreed. I got a minor heart defect, so the electric shock likely impacted me more than it would the average person, and it's not out of the question that something like that could have caused significant damage or even killed me. I called up a lawyer who gladly took the case, and I soon learned that it's against the law, obviously, to build an electric fence in a residential area, let alone not having any warning signs to stop people from approaching them. While I was at it, I brought up the issue of the property lines because if I was gonna get them for the fence, you better believe I want to take on as much as other stuff as possible. They tried to claim that they didn't know about the true property lines, which is an obvious lie, and that they hadn't known an electric fence was illegal to construct. Unsurprisingly, the judge did not have a favorable opinion of them, and we won the lawsuit. I don't think we took enough to leave them bankrupt, but they did have to sell the house in order to have enough money, and not having to live next to them anymore is definitely a win. All I could think about was how easily it could have been a child or a small animal that touched that fence instead of me, or how quickly I could have lost my life because of their stupidity. And yeah, ripe stars, I would not even just say that these neighbors were stupid, but they were completely out of touch with reality. Who in their right mind thinks it's a good idea to put up an electric fence in a residential area? SOP said it is so easy for children or even pets and other animals to touch the electric fence and seriously get injured. But anyway, if you enjoyed the story, please don't forget to post some star emojis in the comments and maybe even like the video if you want to support me. The next one is titled Worst Customer Ever. So this happened last summer. After watching ripe videos all night, I was reminded of this and thought some people might get a kick out of this. So I'm a waiter at one of the nicest restaurants in my hometown. I am pretty reasonable and always end up striking friendly conversations with my tables. I have 1.5 million stories about people who were seemingly very friendly but ended up stiffing me on my tips, but this is malicious compliance after all, so I'm gonna tell you why you should not be a dick to your server until after you receive your food. It is a beautiful day and the restaurant is on the water. Every nice day is absolutely packed. My restaurant does not take reservations of any kind ever, so people have to go in person, request a table, leave and then come back later to eat. Normally locals understand and expect this, there's no problem, but we are a tourist town. When newcomers try to get tables, there's always trouble. This is important in a second. And now I am swamped. I've had my section full for the entire day and had not had time to go on a single 5-minute break since the start of my double shift at 10 AM, and it is now around 6 PM. A couple lands at one of my tables in the corner and they are already upset because they had to wait to get a table after a new girl had tried to take a reservation for them over the phone and they had to be called back and told that they had to come in to reserve a spot. I nod to them, acknowledging that I see them after I notice them glaring daggers at me as if to say, get your butt over here now. I was dealing with a particularly crappy table at the time. Any server reading this will know the type. Every freaking time you come back they need something else. They ask for ketchup, you bring ketchup, and then once you're back they ask for refills on drinks, you run and do that, and then they need salt, and then they want to order more food, etc. Now at this point there are two things you need to understand. Number one, they had sat around waiting for a table for over an hour before being set, and number two, our restaurant has food runners. For those of you who are not familiar with this, it's a group of high school kids that for around 6% of all the tips the restaurant receives will take care of running your food to your table for you. Now, I was the only one person that treated the food runners like human beings instead of pack mules. Because of this, my food runners were very well organized and would happily help me out when I was swamped. A food runner had gone to my table, offered them water, brought them silverware, and told them I would be over shortly. So then 5 minutes later, I roll up and start my speech. Hello, my name is Gray, and welcome to the restaurant. Sorry for the wait, as you can tell, I'm really busy, and the man cuts me off and says, "What's your name?" He asks condescendingly. "Gray," I reply. "Gray," he starts up again. "Why is this the first time you're coming to the table? We've been here waiting for over 45 minutes. They had literally gotten there no more than 8 minutes ago and thought I had not noticed them walk in. You're by far the worst waiter I've ever seen. You should have greeted us and walked us to our table. Another lie, as I saw the hostess do this like she does for every other person that eats here. And now I was already having a bad day and I was on my second part of a double shift that I knew would go well past midnight, so I was having none of it. This guy goes on to insult my posture, my accent, my clothing, I'm wearing a effing uniform, and a myriad of other things. At this point I am staring straight through him, not listening to a single word. Finally he says, "We want another server now." You should be fired for your incompetence. I smile, he would not have asked for that. He basically just gave me the green light to F up the rest of his evening. I am friends with everyone in the restaurant, and when I have a request it can usually be handled almost instantly. But this time was gonna be different. So I walk to the hostess's table and see one of my best friends, let's call her Emma, crying under the counter. Emma is a 4'6" adorable Hispanic girl who was 20 years old at the time. She was just a tiny little thing and she needed a step stool to address people at the front desk. She had a cabinet that she could literally sit in and take naps, and she was in there crying. I gave her a big hug and asked her what was wrong. She said a couple had chewed her out for 10 minutes straight about how terrible she was, and guess who it was? My frickin' table. I asked her if she wanted some revenge and she said hell yes. I told her to take as long as she could, but apparently I was not good enough and they wanted a new table. She smiled, she knew what was gonna happen. I told my water buddy John that Emma was gonna send him a table in an hour or so and went back to work. That couple watched 3 tables sit down, order their food, eat and pay, and leave before they even got to order. They sat and wanted the entire time just to try and stick it to me. The look on their faces as I happily and efficiently took care of all my tables right in front of them was priceless. Since they were not my table anymore, I did not visit them once. After they were moved, ate and left. I asked the waiter that took their table how they were, and he said they were very polite and patient with him. I think that would be the last time they treat waitstaff so horribly. And the next one is titled, Grandma is Awful. I, 26 female at the time in 2021, have only a living paternal grandma, 90 female. Growing up I tried to bond and form any form of emotional connection, but it only caused me to not be related to her by blood. I usually would get compared to her favorite grandchildren. She would also constantly abuse me emotionally, told me constantly that I was the black sheep of the family, and told me I was not gonna succeed in life, which is why I tried to unalive myself because she motivated them most of the time. The last straw for me was when my older brother died, he was 25 male, and told my grieving parents that another filthy soul out of this world, my brother, was an innocent soul that was killed off for only eating in a fast food restaurant, and I snapped at her, telling her, "The day your funeral comes, I will probably wear the brightest red dress I have in my closet, because I'll never mourn your loss. On the contrary, I will celebrate when that happens." This happened in 2014. Since then, at every family event, I would avoid her or pretend she doesn't exist. Hell, I would even skip going to her birthday parties. So last November she got sick and she wanted all her children and grandkids to take care of her in the hospital, since her favorite daughter, my aunt, 52 female, and her favorite grandchildren cannot do it. She said this to my dad over the phone and I told her, sorry, but my grandparents died in 2K14 and 2K12. And I don't have any other grandparents since I'm not a granddaughter to my last living grandparent. She then started to cry, more like manipulate, and told me that I am her granddaughter and this could be a good moment to bond and mend our relationship. I said to her, now I am your granddaughter? I needed you for 26 years, but in those 26 years you broke me emotionally and I cannot since I study and work. Plus, there's no relationship to save here. I hung up for my father before she could say anything. I've been told I'm a horrible human being for what I've said to her, but I don't feel sorry at all for her. I mean, she dug her own grave, now she can go and lie in it for all I care. That is karma for you. And yeah, ripe stars, let me know in the comments what you think about this. Do you think that OP was the a-hole in this situation, or did the grandma get exactly what she deserved? Let me know in the comments. And the next one is titled Netflix Revenge. I absolutely despise my in-laws, they are money-grabbing monsters. Long story short, they nearly made my wife, children and I homeless a few years ago because of their own greed and see no issues with it. Anyway, I come home after work and wife has had a rubbish day, so I order a takeaway and we settle for a night of binge watching TV. Then I see that my in-laws have profiles on our Netflix. I don't even mention it, but I am fuming. Those thieving little rats cannot even cough up a few dollars a month for Netflix. I talk to my friend about it, he laughs, I rage more. So I set their profiles and kids' profiles and they cannot watch anything with a higher rating than you. I also set a password on our profile so they cannot go into the settings to change it. I am loving it, swaggering around thinking I'm a champ, showing off my pettiness to the guys at work, telling everyone and anyone who would listen. They have asked my wife about it, she changes it back and I give it the whole "my goodness, how on earth has that happened? Must be a system error or something." Then I change it back again. What a hero I am. I tell everyone a second time how I have effectively ruined their lives now that their viewing options are Paw Patrol and Noddy. Also, it turns out they've been sending my wife the money for Netflix for some time now. I have since changed the viewing settings back to standard. Edit: I did not expect this much attention, but thanks for the rewards. To everyone asking why they nearly made us homeless, we were supposed to be moving into their second home while paying full rent etc., as it had been on the market for a while, but it was not shifting. Less than 10 days before moving day, they decided to sell that they were not exactly strapped for cash, as they were bragging they were in the process of selling a bit of land for £1 million to a developer. Luckily, our landlord at the time was a decent guy and let us carry on where we were living. The universe obviously saw how pissed off I was because the sale of both the second home and the land fell through. When they asked when we were expecting to move into their second home and start paying them rent, they got a big F off from me. On the point that my wife should communicate better such a petty comment. I love it. The next one is titled, "I guess I cannot park here legally." So I recently started working at an adult foster home. For those of you that don't know, it's basically a big house where people with mental disabilities live as normal and independent of a life as possible. We are located on a normal street with neighbors. I have been parking across the street since it's close and easy. The third day parking there, yesterday, we get a call from the lady across the street, mad that I am parked legally on the street in front of her house because if the street sweepers come, they won't be able to sweep there. My boss came to me and explained the situation and just nicely asked me to move my car. Just because she asked nicely, I decided to move my car, but did talk to my mom about the situation later that day. We both agreed that it was not okay for that to happen. Today I had a CPR class to attend and without thinking about it, parked in the same spot. Within 3 minutes of being inside, she was on the phone again. My boss again talked to me, explaining that while it was legal, our company wants us to maintain a positive relationship with our neighbors. I was annoyed and asked her if I had to, and again she asked nicely, so I went out to move it. As I was unlocking my car, Karen comes outside and starts telling me how disrespectful I am. I tried to explain just to her that it was legal and that I was about to move it, and she said she could not hear me due to hearing loss. So I moved closer to speak with her but would not step on her property. She came down the driveway telling me how stupid I was and how since she paid taxes her property goes all the way to the middle of the street. Unless I'm crazy, I'm pretty sure that's not how that works. She claimed that I did not pay taxes, said her husband was disabled and that if she had guests over they needed to park there, and all these were reasons that I was not allowed to park there. When she threatened to call my bosses while I knew that probably would not go anywhere, I still wanted to cover my butt, so I called the police department to make sure there was a record of the situation and her behavior. Made it clear that I did not want anything done, just a record, but the officer was not having it. She said that despite whatever our situation was, Karen could not be harassing people for parking on the street. Not sure what exactly happened after that, but the officer confirmed what house it was and said she would go speak to the lady. Needless to say, I'm probably going to continue to park there, just to let this lady know she cannot treat people like that. The next one is titled, I screwed over my ex. This was quite a long time ago. I was in my early 20s and had just gotten out of relationship. The separation was not exactly a pretty one. We had lived together and I was beyond ready to move out and never speak to him again. There was just one problem. We were only 5 months into a 1-year lease at our duplex. We had a 2-bedroom duplex, but I did not want to ride it out because, as I said, messy breakup, tons of tension, so I moved in with a friend. Soon after, I called my landlord and explained the situation to see if anything could be done. After the call, I brought the options to my ex. Number 1, find someone to take over my portion of the lease for the remaining months. He refused to do that and said he would not find someone to take my portion. B. Breaking the lease. I felt like this would have been a good option because he had a ton of family who would have easily taken him in. He refused this option as well and said he was not making me move out. I chose to, so I can deal with the consequences of my actions. He just refused to compromise with me at all. I had friends and family recommend I just don't pay rent at all, but I did not want to screw myself with an eviction on my rental history just to spite him. At this point I realized there was nothing I could do. I sucked it up and pretty much just accepted the fact that I was going to have to make 7 months worth of rent payments for a place I was no longer living at. So that is what I did. However, a few months later I was hanging out with a friend of mine. He was a friend of both my ex and I. He decided to let me know that my ex very recently had 5 people move into our apartment. 3 of them were unemployed and staying there rent-free. The other 2 had jobs and were each paying 1/3 of his portion of the rent. Not gonna lie, if they would have covered my entire portion or even just part of it, I most likely would have let it go. The fact that he found people to live there after he told me he wouldn't, to keep me on the lease, and was cutting the cost of his own rent while making me pay my full portion for a place I no longer lived at, brought me to a level of anger I did not even know existed. I decided that if he wanted to continue to screw me over, then I was going to screw him over too. The next day I made a call to my landlord and told him everything. He immediately contacted my ex, made him pay a fine, and told him that each and every one of the tenants needed to apply to be on the lease. All of them applied, none of them got approved, so they were all kicked out. He had to continue to pay his portion for the remaining months of the lease. Pretty sure he never found out it was me who ratted him out. And with this, we have reached the end of the video. However, if you cannot get enough of my content, then please don't forget to check out my endless playlist, which has thousands of videos and hours of content. In addition, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on the bell to not miss any of my daily uploads. Thank you so much, and I will see you again tomorrow.